then coming out of that first season, you've ironed out the cracks, if you like. You've learned a lot of lessons. You then have 2 years where you make the playoffs both seasons, 2 very good seasons. So we'll get into that in terms of some of the best memories from those teams. But I think I'll come to you first, Creon, with those 2 seasons. I mean, that first year you obviously learned with what the deal is with Scorchers and your relationship with Gavin and Tay and how it all moulded. And did you learn perhaps what the key was going to be to building a successful roster within the means with the Scorchers, and what lessons did you learn and how did that pay off in those 2 years?
So year 2, I went to Gavin and I said, look, I've got to bring in my guys. Like, I've got to bring in people that I trust. I got to bring in, people that are going to run walls for me and stuff and that there. So my approach in the team that I put together and that we got together in the following season had the likes of people like Albert Margai, Khalil Irving, Michael Charobia, who were people that I'd known from way before. Some I had coached before. And so I knew that they would bring just a blue collar kind of approach to everything. I think we added Quincy to that. Quincy had played kind of like a natural point guard role for Cheshire, but I saw something in him, and there's nothing better than watching a player play live when you want to sign them. And so we brought him in, and so I looked at the maturity of the team, and it looked pretty solid having those experienced guys in there, as well as somebody like Laken was still around, who has tons of experience, Laken Papula. And then we brought in, I think it was Chaz Rollins, that we added to the mix, and Chaz was the young guy with a lot of energy, and he brought a lot of good stuff to it. But I had a group now that wanted to be there, and I think that group was also a group that wanted to be there, not looking at what's happening next. They were playing for the now, and we had a simple, goal, which was to make the playoffs. So as high as we wanted to finish, our goal that particular season 2 was to make the playoffs, and I think that team had a level of maturity also, and hunger and desire that made them special.
And for you, Teo, obviously a very different season to the year 1, because all of a sudden you were winning a fair few games and obviously got to the playoffs. I mean, how was that year different to the first year? Was it simply as a case of Creon just said of more experience?
I think the group of guys we had that year understood what the objective was. They obviously knew as well that the previous year didn't go as planned, so there was the added we have to do well as a unit this year, and we had a good mix of guys as well. Everybody understood the plan. Everybody understood the goal. Were we the most talented group in terms of the 5 years that have gone by? Probably not as talented as other years, but we understood how to play. We understood what we needed to do, and guys really committed. I think had we been a little bit more talented, we probably would have done a lot better than we did. I think with a little bit more of maybe scoring ability, we would have been one of the top teams in the league that year.
And obviously the season was, you'd say one of the highlights was probably Gabe McRae's shot against Leicester in the playoffs. I mean, have you got any particular memories from that year for either of you that spring to mind? Gavin, any games that spring to your mind?
Yeah, you know what? I think that obviously we'll get on to year 3 in a minute, but year 2, that's the year that as it didn't feel like anything particularly special, but as that season sort of progressed, I suddenly started noticing the numbers coming into after Christmas. It started getting bigger in the crowd. I started seeing some familiar faces. That's the point where I started thinking, you know what, actually, we're starting to turn spectators into fans. And not a huge amount, but you start to see regular faces return. I think that was it for me, really, because that second season from the 5 years, I don't remember any or many blowouts at all. I don't think I remember any blowouts at home. They were always renowned, and that second season was the start of this sort of having some close games, and obviously that Leicester game, that was the game, and I think that if you that was just amazing. I mean, the moments. I mean, the video footage still makes me laugh now, and you see Dave Aldridge was the MC, like coming on and bundling Scorcher over, and it was just it was just superb. And I think that actually, and then when I talk, it's interesting from that high. I talk about probably two of our most memorable, like, disappointing games were, you know, that Leicester. We'd drawn the game, which was a basketball thing, and then we went and really sort of did a flat game away at Leicester. And then the year after, similarly with Glasgow, we'd done a fantastic job at home and fell flat. And actually, that was sort of that thing. But yeah, that was probably the second year I started to think, you know what, we've got this here. And for me, obviously, it became less about on court. That was another thing. I'd got over my first year of it being about, I love basketball, I want to win, and I want to be part of it, to going, actually, you know, I need to step away from this a bit. I need to think about what we have off court. And that's the point I started saying, well, actually, I'd rather have a game that's 1 point in it and it goes down to the last seconds, because it's more exciting. We sell more tickets, you know, than blowing teams out either way. So yeah, I think that was the moment for me. I started to think, you know what, we've got a real good chance here.
Mm. And I mean, after that year too, obviously the Gabe shot was, you know, the poster of the, you know, end of that season. Going into year 3, and that's, you know, when I kind of came on the scene with the media side of things. But that was, you know, an unforgettable season. Obviously, the unbeaten run at home that went from January 1st to the end of the season. So for Creon and Teo, I mean, what was that like for you guys? Obviously, finishing 5th in the league and having a terrific run at home. I mean, that must have surely been the moment you've been waiting for a couple of years. You know, that really, really strong run and really strong roster as well.
I think the building of that roster was a lot. It was probably our most experienced roster. I think if we have to take the ages of people and look at the amount of pro years that played and so forth, it did a lot of things that freed up a lot of people. And the other part that happened within that was people accepted their roles. You know, when we started, it's never easy starting with a whole new group of guys. I remember people, you know, wanting, you know, they really wanted Quincy back, you know, and because Tony was still trying to figure things out, and I was like, nah, he'll be okay. And we gave Tony the time, and he got that. But two key people for me in that season. One was obviously Gerald Robinson's performances on the court. You know, Teo will tell you some stories about Gerald. Like, he come running into practice just as practice is about to begin, but he was never late for practice. But he just about make it into practice as practice was about to begin in his trainers and tracksuit bottom. And then the other person was Alex Owumi, and I think one of the strengths that Alex Owumi brought to the team in terms of the leadership is it freed up Teo a lot more. You know, I think year 2 Teo was really good, and that was because he had Albert, and Albert's a person that can lead a change room. And Teo don't get me wrong, he does a great job in the change room, but it allows him to focus on his game. And then when we got Alex Owumi, he made a big difference in that leadership. And that's also somebody that's won. You know, sometimes when you're trying to figure out winning as a coach, I've won in different environments and stuff, but you need players to be able to do that. And so having players that had won, that also made a difference. You know, like people won't understand what an impact that a person like Levi Novell had. You know, might not have been everybody's cup of tea in terms of his style of play. But having been in the Leicester organization, he picked up things, and I think accepting a role was one of the other things that he had learned that he had to do. So we had a lot of players that no matter what was going on away from the court, when it came to time to play the game, it was let's win the game. We can deal with everything else after that. I also remember that team, like Gavin said, you have the natural teething problems no matter what, no matter how early you start. And you're trying to get everybody on the floor early, something happens. But that team, everything clicked. Everybody got here on time. You know, when we had a barbecue, everybody was there. Everybody was in the country. I can tell you a story because I like Gerald Robinson. And when I was speaking to Alex is like, man, we got to get Gerald. And I was like, man, I don't think we can afford Gerald, you know. And he's like, no, don't worry. I'll speak to him. You know, so I said, okay, fine. If you can speak to him, then I got on the phone with Gerald. We spoke about 2 or 3 times, and it's like, Coach, I want to come to England again because they had played at Plymouth. I said, okay, let's make this happen. And then we are getting to the time to arrive, and then Gerald's like, I'm in America. I'm not going to make it in time. And Alex was like, nah. And Alex got on the phone to him and said, man, if you don't get back here by this time, then I'm going to make sure that coach cuts your contract. So you better sort yourselves out and get over here. And he got him across here like straight away. So having guys like that maturity and so forth, is a big thing. Was a big thing for us in that particular year, because we still had some young guys. One of our favorite players, Jordan. But Jordan won't argue with people who have been there and done it. So because there was enough experience around, he kind of like just performed and stuff in that day, because before that, he'd only listen to Teo. Anybody else had been talking to them, Jordan listens to me, listens to Teo. Anybody else, like, no, I don't need to hear what you got to say and stuff. But yeah, so that year, everybody got in on time, and we were able to do the bonding stuff and everything. And I think everybody started accepting their roles early,
And in terms of that third season as well, let's not forget, obviously, you brought Kalen in for the first time. And also Josh Steele was at an early stage in his career. I mean, a serious firepower from the bench as well. Do you think that was a key to how you finished so high in the table?
Yeah, Josh Steele was an interesting one, because I keep in contact with all the coaches around England, and Lloyd Gardner called me and said, "Oh, Josh Steele's available," and I was like, "Yeah, well, what do you want me to do with Josh?" Because Josh obviously came from Duquesne, big university, and he was like, "Nah, he wants an opportunity. He needs an opportunity, Creon." And I said, "Look, we don't have Josh Steele money, so I've already spent most of my budget. I can't do anything." It's like, no, he just wants to learn and he wants to play. And so got on the phone to Josh, spoke to him, made it clear to him that this is what was going to happen, and brought him in. And an interesting part was, I thought, like, this kid's talented. This guy can really play. And I remember bumping into Alan Keane, the England under-18 coach, and he had come to one or two Scorchers games and seen Josh, and he said to me, he said, "Man, what a great job you did with Josh. Like, we never thought Josh was going to play, but he is actually in your rotation." And I was like, "Yeah, no, he can play," and he accepted, he accepted his role. So that was big time. Kalen had played with Alex before, so they knew how to work together and stuff in that day. So that team had great balance. A lot of people don't know that, Teo and Alex were obviously the leaders, but Kalen coached quite a few games that season, because I ended up going back home because my dad wasn't well. And so Kalen with Steve Crane and Dave had to take a couple of games and stuff. But that just showed the maturity of the team. Because sometimes you take the head coach away, everybody's going to just be like complaining. But they stuck together. And
for you, Teo, obviously that was the season where you went on that run, like I mentioned. For you guys, obviously it was double digits in terms of the amount of games you went unbeaten at home. What was it like as a player? Did you come into every game and just kind of with that mindset of, we're going to win this game? Because it seemed like no matter what you did, you ended up winning at home, and it was amazing, and more and more fans were coming every game. What was the mindset like with the team playing at home?
That third season, we really had a strong, solid unit of team, and like Creon said, everybody knew their roles. So I think early on in the season, it was that tussle for guys to figure out what we're doing, like, where do I fit in here? And that took a few months. To be fair, that took a few months. But then after a while, you just organically, it just kind of clicked, and guys understood what their role was. They really keyed in on what they were supposed to be doing on the court. They understood where we were supposed to be scoring from, who was supposed to be scoring at who liked to score from where, like how we were going to push the ball. Like we had so many weapons that year. Like it was impossible for teams to try and outscore us. Gerald, Alex, I mean, there was too many weapons. Josh coming off the bench, it was a lot. So once we all figured out, and it's not something that needs to be said, but once you figure it out how you're going to play, like it just happens organically. And from that's where the wins came. We understood that Tony was going to run the team in terms of the point guard, and from that he did a great job. After we figured out the kinks, he did a great job of running the team and getting guys the ball where guys like to score, and himself scoring and being a threat. And once he figured out that he was a threat, it then freed up other guys. We had Gerald doing craziness from inside and out, so it was a tough team to compete with. And once we had figured that, like, we would be in the locker rooms just kind of smiling to ourselves, because we knew that we were capable of beating anybody at any given time. It was just whether we could concentrate enough and lock in, and people keep to the game plan. If someone deferred or someone let up off that game plan, that's normally when we struggled. But to be fair, some of the games we did drop, it was by a few points. So that was it really. That was the main difference. Once we had keyed in on it, and that run thing was always in the back of our minds as well. Like, we always had that. No one really said it, but everyone at the end of the day, we'd go back and we'd be like, oh, so how many is that now? Okay, all right. And then we gave ourselves that little nod and we carried on. So that was in the back of our minds as well. It's always good to keep a winning streak like that.
I think that also we got, like the boys have said, there's some great recruitment, great individuals, got ourselves organised. There's also a bit of luck in there as well, luck in the nicest possible way. Well, and unfortunate for us, in a Josh Steele, he blew up. He had an outstanding season. Like, second half of the season, he was. I think he may even ended up in the starting five as the season sort of progressed. I think in the end, he was, bringing Alex off the bench on some of the games, and then we also had, which was, unfortunate for Teo, but I think it was the Commonwealth Games year, and I think that, in my mind, Teo's one of the best English basketball players of this generation, in terms of playing in the BBL. It was in my mind, absolute travesty that he wasn't in that Commonwealth Games side. But you know what? We benefit for that, because obviously he was around, and again, maybe it's perhaps a question for you, Teo, about that experience. I know it was probably a personal disappointment, but I wonder whether, again, that missing out on that, whether you felt that you had a point to prove as the sort of the season came near the end, because I think your performances that season were just outstanding. I think that was the year that corner three started coming into your game as well. It was ridiculous. I don't know what your memories of that Commonwealth Games process, Teo.
Obviously, it was a great honour, even just to get as far as I got, to be part of that process and go out there and practice and get ready for the Commonwealth with those group of guys. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed. I was pretty disappointed. But when you go into the meeting and sit down and they talk to you about why they didn't select you, or the reasons for how you could better fit into the team, or what they were looking for, it was definitely motivation for me. Them telling me they needed me to be a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. It was definitely motivation for me. So I tried to key in on that when I was going into the BBL seasons, that this is what the national team needed me to do. So if I do it on my platform where I am at, it will help my team. And so I definitely took away from a lot of positives. Well, they were negatives, so I turned them into positives for myself from that experience. So for me, it was a period of learning as well. So I guess that did help us in the run, and it made me more determined to make my team successful, because you're always going to have negative points in your career, but it's just how you use them to your benefit.
Yeah. I think I remember two key moves that year 3 was one of the toughest. It's never ever fun releasing a player. There's no way of ever doing it in the right way. So and we had to release a player who stuck with the group. He left the team, but he stayed with them through WhatsApp. Was Daryl Palmer, and he was DP was just like a great guy. Like, the energy was there and so forth. And the only reason we changed him was, once again, my favorite power forward, Jordan Williams, had gone somewhere else to try out stuff, and then he came in and we put him in the practices. and the guys could see the difference that Jordan brought to the team. And so we had to make that decision, and that was when we made the decision that we had to make the change. And like I said, like, we couldn't go over budget and so forth. So one person comes in, somebody got to go out, and unfortunately, it was Daryl. You know, he hadn't done anything wrong, but it just was Jordan knew the BBL. So that was one point that I think made a big difference. The other thing was, like Teo had said, and I told Gavin about this, we needed people to accept their roles and understand each person, and that's the only way a team can ever be successful. And I took everybody into where the new offices are now, where the marketing office and so forth is. At the time, it was just a training room, and we sat in there, and a very interesting part of learning about who's who, because sometimes guys come and play, they respect each other and so forth, but nobody knows the people's backgrounds. And we sat there, and I started off, and I said, like, you know, hey, you know, I'm Coach Creon. You know, I'm married. I got 2 sons. I've got a brother. I've lost my mom, you know, and so forth. And I'd lost my dad around that time. I think it was 4 years. It wasn't well or something. And we went around the room, and when we went around the room, I remember it being a few guys who had grown up in an environment with 2 parents. You know, it was, and guys were looking at each other. You know, there were guys there and it was quite an emotional meeting, but people realized that, like, people are going to have good days and going to have bad days. But that was one of the deepest team environmental meetings that I ever had, because the amount of respect that these guys all had for each other after that meeting was unbelievable. So sometimes, like, when people talk about modern sport, there's a lot of emphasis on the tactics and the so forth and stuff, which makes a big part. But if you listen to the top coaches talk, it's all about people skills and how people communicate with people, how comfortable players are, how happy they are. And sometimes you can get across to people quickly, and sometimes it takes some time in order to get to that. You know, and when we get to team 4, I'll have a perfect story on exactly how important it is for your teammates to allow you to thrive. And I think that one meeting made a big difference. But it was a fun group, you know. Gavin can tell you about the amount of compliments he got about Gerald Robinson and how he looked after the gym and stuff in that day. And these are the fun things about the sports park and stuff in that day. That was I mean, Gavin can kind of like say how hard Gerald worked in the gym.
Yeah, Gerald spent a lot of time in the gym. He was very popular in there. Yeah. But you know what? I all jokes aside, you know, there's players that the fans now, you know, and you know, we joke about some of some of our former colleagues that aren't with us and stuff, but they talk about Gerald, they talk about Tony. So that season is talked about quite a lot still, and people talk about some of these players. I know the season you were involved, Tom, you know, and actually that's again, we need to, at some point we need to give some of you guys a credit. And you've been in newspapers until you come along. You were work experience, I think, volunteering, and suddenly we're in the Serie A, and then we weren't for a year, and then you come back this year, and suddenly we're in the Serie A, you know, and you know the impact, and I think that's the thing that. There's like we said earlier, you know, many people probably won't recognise him, which is fine. In fact, on match days, I go and sit in Block B with my daughter out of the way, near the away fans, if anything. And there's so many others, you know, who later on will shine a light on that have contributed off court, which makes an absolute difference about being part of that family, you know. And those guys were great. Like you said, they're great. Gerald, Alex, you know, they were great. You know, they're the kind of people you want in an organisation, not a basketball team, an organisation. You know, they're good people with in excellent interpersonal skills. Again, some very good interpersonal skills than others. But you know, it's fantastic.
I think that you hit the nail on the head there, Gav, about which is something that that I know you work very, very hard on. What Surrey Sports Park is, you know, Scorchers is just a part of Surrey Sports Park. And I think that year, more than most years, there was engagement from, you know, the marketing team were into it, and they loved what the Scorchers were doing, and you know, We had Ryan brought in a whole lot of ideas. Your work with getting in the newspapers was big time. Becca was doing the graphic. Everything was just like going. And then and the same thing with the people that were like Claire was involved with the community projects and stuff, and that she could count on players to do stuff, and so she was interacting. So it wasn't just going through me. Everybody was understood who the players were, and I think also that group of guys were very outgoing group also. So they weren't kind of like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't greet because they might not greet back, and so they were initiated, if that makes any sense. And I think that makes a big difference when you get that feel good vibe from everybody. You know, how they walk into reception and greet the people at reception and so forth. You know, that makes a big difference, and that's what we're trying to also keep on going.